Okay. Yes, most welcome here, everyone, to this session on a nature-positive economy for climate and biodiversity benefits. First of all, do you hear me well? Great. So I wanted to thank all of those who have been part of planning and preparing this session, as well as, of course, the speakers who have come here and those who are with us online, and of course all of you. I hope we will have a productive, interactive and forward-looking discussion to review a lot of interesting experience, but also face the challenges that we are all sort of confronted with for the future days and months and years ahead. So let me start with, if you can show the PowerPoint. So should I be pressing here? Okay. Right. First of all, my name is Thomas Anderson. I'm from Sweden, a think tank in south of Sweden, ICED. Also involved in one of the Horizon 2020 projects, Urbinat, which you can see among the 16 projects that form part of the task force that we are here representing. That's a task force on business model and investment in nature-based solutions projects. So basically here what you have is a pretty extensive collection of experiences and ongoing learning in real time, how you implement nature-based solutions primarily across Europe in different European cities. We have about 150 cities in Europe engaged in this, but there are also some cities outside of Europe. There is a really healthy exchange of also perspectives and learning with non-Europeans. I don't have the time to go into details, but of course you have a lot of material on the websites and so on that anybody can visit here. I also wanted to mention that we came out with this publication, The Vital Role of Nature-Based Solutions in a Nature-Positive Economy, that was presented not that long ago, earlier this year. And here, of course, the challenge really is how we can get environment and economy to go together. And in that context, the role of business models and investment and so on is very, very important. Now, when it comes to nature-based solutions with this audience, I'm pretty sure we don't have to go into details, but this is, of course, about using the assets, the functionality, the properties of nature, of ecosystems, to revitalize our societies and our lives. And also the emphasis here is very strongly on people, on inclusion. This is not just for a few. This is about how to get society to come along. Now, the value of nature and the value of nature-based solutions is not a given. It depends on the context. And we are living at a time when we have really shifted from a world that used to be what we could say an empty world. We had endless nature around us, and it was labor and infrastructure and perhaps traditional capital that limited the boundaries of our existence. Today, the situation is utterly different. We are in a full world. The boundaries for our lives and our society have to do with the natural resources, the environmental sinks, the living ecosystems that are under pressure. So in that context, the nature-based solutions can come into play and fulfill a lot of different sort of missions and roles in society. But how do they come about? Not by themselves. So what we refer to as nature-based enterprises, but also, of course, social sort of networks and local communities are vital for putting the nature-based solutions into play and to find ways of having sustainable development of the associated services. Now, we have a lot of experience to share, as already indicated, from the ongoing projects in the European Union. There are best practices, there are tools and strategies in support of those enterprises and the benefits for diverse biodiversity, ecosystems, and so on. In the presentations you will hear from some of the members who are involved in the project, we will highlight also some of the knowledge gaps that still are plaguing the way forward and which need to be overcome, not least for nature-based enterprises to fulfill their roles. And we will also look at the role of other stakeholders whose investments and behaviors matter greatly. Before continuing with the speakers, a few words on the wider policy context and the issues that we are confronted with if we're really going to get investment and the financials to work out in this context. This is a bit of the traditional map that we are all aware of the policy frameworks from the global level down to the national level, and then of course we have the cities and so forth. But if we are going to have the investment that's required in nature-based solutions, the private sector has to work out. So it's about the enterprises themselves as well as the financial institutions around. This is kind of estimate of how you need to switch the sources of funding from primarily public to private in the years to come if the success is to be, potential success is to be realized. And you have ESG momentum in the market. Environment, society, governance playing out. There are a lot of different frameworks that set the stage for companies to achieve higher levels of compliance with nature-friendly behavior, get better conditions for their lending, for the investment and so forth. Now, that has an impact today. There is the impact of green that we refer to, with the cost of capital, the cost of assets and loans coming down in private sector if you can demonstrate ESG compliance. The capital costs are now affected by behaviors with regard to nature. Another example of a private, market mechanism, of course, is about the carbon credits. This is the European ETS market. In 2021, this market had a turnover of about $270 billion. So carbon traded, emission, absorption, and so forth, and trying to get, efficiency into this market that is on. If you look at individual projects, you have maybe bilateral arrangements between those who undertake projects and those who invest in them, and you can see the price of carbon going considerably higher than the $70 that we achieved in the ETS market at the end of 2021. Then you can have a real challenge, of course, to show what is really impactful here, but this reflects the value not only of the carbon, but of biodiversity and the other fulfillment of the other sustainable development goals. Now, so that was a bit of, like a promising picture perhaps, but at the same time, when you look worldwide, the prices for carbon vary considerably. There are a lot of different places where the price is down and you exchange, your emissions for absorption at maybe a very low cost. The world has a lot of areas where you require investment in nature and where it's very hard to get the funding to work out. We are engaged in Oman. It's one country where we can see here plantations with water-saving technology in very dry areas. This is another example of mangroves. This is not yet really quite being developed, but it is in an advanced stage of preparation. 45,000 hectares of mangroves that could be put in place. That is given that the financials work out. Business models, financials, and nature-based solutions need to go together. So how do we get the dynamics to work out? How do we counter the underinvestment in nature? Because the benefits of nature are so far-reaching and go in so many directions. We need new mechanisms for having stakeholders and investors and projects to go together. This is the context for what we're looking at, the value of nature-based solutions and funding and investment in that. So against that backdrop, I wanted to introduce to you our first speaker of the day, and we'll come back to questions and so on later on. So very pleased to have with us Monica Altamirano from the Netherlands and from Nicaragua. Very, very impressive CV. A lot of experience for many years, not least when it comes to water management. And Monica is the head of Task Force 3, the governance and finances of NBS. And also she's the author of a handbook of the implementation of NBS for water society. And of course, you're very much involved in water equity. Most welcome.
Thank you very much. I'm happy to be joining here. So today I'm also, so I've been involved in the European Task Force for Nature-Based Solutions and active in the past through the Water Institute of the Netherlands in a project called Nature Insurance Value Assessment and Demonstration. And that's also where the handbook that it will be mentioned here is also what was produced. But maybe driven by this urgency to make a change and actually work more directly also at the finance side to drive this change, I change and work also now at water equity. Maybe we can go to the next slide. And just before I go on presenting, what we want to share with you is that so water equity is the first asset manager exclusively focused on water and sanitation and working in emerging economies to achieve universal access, right? And so what we want to share today here is more like our take on a nature-positive economy. How can we get there? And although we're not investing directly in nature-based solutions at this moment, of course, when we invest in the capacity to trade water and we want to invest in resilient infrastructure in the water space, we will come back to the need of incorporating nature-based solutions. So I'd like to go to the first. Oh, sorry, it's my job. Okay, so to start, I think this is the cope that where we I think basically all are realizing that it's too late. Hopefully not, but but climate change has challenged our status quo, and it's costing some regions up to 6% of their GDP, and hundreds of millions will be forced from their homes in coastal areas. I'm actually very active in the Climate Mobility Pavilion, and I invite you to come there because it is a reality in many places in Africa that people have to leave their homes, And so, and at the same time, we have a $15 trillion gap in infrastructure investments. So how do we make sure now that we're reactivating our economies, that we're doing our NDCs and all kind of plans, that the way we invest do not lock us into the past, but actually enable us to leapfrog towards a regenerative economy? And I've been obsessing with this question for quite some years because I come from the infrastructure sector and went into the water and environment sector. And I think there are three things we can do. They are massive, but there are ways to get there. And it's like we need three revolutions in understanding why is that we are here, right? How do we reconcile economy and environment in planning and in financing? And the best place to start is to reconsider and rethink how do we originate the investments we do as countries or as private sector. And so if going there, there are many advances, right? Like multiple financing facilities and instruments like green bonds, and you name it. We have made also already this overview in that European project, and we keep updating it. But and the private sector, I think a big step is the private sector has to understand that the real license to operate are not governments, but nature and the freshwater ecosystems on which their value chains depend. So they want to invest beyond their fences. And we have this idea of blended finance, where donors are working with impact investors to get money to where it's really needed. And at the same time, I think one thing that COVID was good in doing is to shift the urgency. And BlackRock, the biggest asset manager, said that in their survey of 2020, they realized that sustainability is now mainstream investing. It's not anymore a niche. So sounds all very promising, right? Sounds like we're getting there, but the question, there are like three big things that are missing, and that's what I hope that we can discuss together today, and is most of our models and our efforts are feeding in those siloed models in which we invest in water, we invest in energy, we invest in transport. And those financial metrics that we use to favor investments is favoring monofunctional, centralized, and gray infrastructure assets, and not the adaptive, multifunctional, nature-based solutions assets that we need. And the second, and that's where we're like putting a lot of effort to, is that, I mean, everybody says that there is finance in abundance, but we don't have bankable projects. But it's all because we don't have in countries the capacity. We have not created the capacity for people to develop projects that are fit for an era of uncertainty, but that have a very strong theory of change, and that shows that we can develop in a different way. So that capacity, right, that local capacity to structure is where I think also the effort of the task force and many things that the partners are doing fits in. And I will go very quickly to this to get to the final point, and that's like also in the infrastructure sector, where is that many of these investments are being originated. There are hopeful changes, like, for example, a new vision as infrastructure as a mean to achieve societal outcomes when we use the power of technology to actually consider already the impacts on nature and the proposition that nature does for resilience. But maybe the most point here is that we can have all those efforts, but the capacity to structure projects in many countries, the regular vanilla gray infrastructure projects, is not there. We have big delays, and there are banks who give loans to countries, and maybe they are canceled after 3 years because the project has not all the feasibility studies and so forth. So it's a problem because we want to go to that big step of a regenerative economy and nature-based solutions projects, but it's also an opportunity, and we are betting that that's the point, right? If we're going to enhance those capacities, why don't we do it already in the new way? And with that, I'd like to pass it back.
Yes. Okay. Yes. So thank you very much, Monica. And I mean, it's a starking picture. There is so much going on. There is so much opportunity, but the challenges are there, and capacity is lacking, and the financial instruments are not quite working out. So now, thank you for that. I wanted to turn here to one of our online speakers, who we had hoped would be with us, but unfortunately that was not the case. We have Dr. Fabio Montagnino from the Cyprus Institute.
Hi, Thomas.
Yes, hi Fabio. Good to have you with us, this way at least. So Fabio is the coordinator of the 12th Task Force on Green Economy and Innovation of the East Mediterranean and the Middle East. It's a quite ambitious collaborative setup that you're leading out of Cyprus. And yeah, we're very pleased to have you with us.
Yeah, thank you, Thomas, and sorry for not being there. There was an issue in the pass release for the blue zone, and this messed up all my participation there in COP. But I'm trying. Let's hope that the connection will help us. Well, yes, we have been starting this initiative now more than 2 years ago, and yesterday was the most important day for the MCCI initiative, because we got the endorsement of 10 countries. We are developing this initiative from Cyprus for 17 countries in the area. So the idea is to impact with this, let's say, regional plan, 500 million people. So it's very, very ambitious. And we might go to the next one, to the next slide. So you will see the area we are addressing. So we are talking about a huge area, which is heavily stressed by the climate change. Is one of the hotspots. We forecast with our climate scientists that we might reach +5 degrees by the end of the century. But what is worst is that we have very strong fluctuation in temperatures. So we can expect heat waves with even 10 degrees of smashes, let's say, in summer. That means that we might cross easily the 50 degrees in that period, and this will be deeper, and heavier. So we are proposing a coordinated action in all the area to address the Paris Agreement, but it's more in the sense that we have to prepare these countries in any case to the impact of climate change and work on their resilience. We can go to the next slide. So these countries are quite diverse in the sense that they've been, let's say, growing, some of them, by stressing the planetary boundaries. So we have scientific evidence that this process of, let's say, getting social achievements has been supported by the exploitation of nature. So it's clear that we have to now step back, and as the biocapacity, the initial biocapacity of these countries was already low, because we are talking about countries with deserts, with a low amount of water capacity, with competition and pressure of urbanized areas against the limited rural areas. So we have to think in a completely different way and leverage capitals that have been accumulated by exploitation of natural resources in order to regenerate nature. We can go to the next one. So here you see, I mean, we have already, we could account for the damages coming from the climate change until today, and this is almost nothing if we compare this current scenario. Here you see the floods in Jeddah, which are quite regular now, and due to the modified circulation of the in the area of the Red Sea. We are going to face more and more devastating events. So it's worth also in terms of economics, if we start accounting the risk for these catastrophic events, to invest in resilience. We have a concentration of industries in the area. The population has been growing exponentially, and this is it needs to address, first of all, the natural resilience in cities. We can go to the next one. So what we did was a comprehensive approach to 13 sectors, starting from the physical background and going down to all the economic and socio-economic domains. So from tourism to agriculture to the impact on the cultural heritage. In particular, what we did in the task force, I've been the honor to coordinate with 30 colleagues, has been to identify 4 missions and 4 approaches, so 4 mechanisms, let's say, from some 4 policy mechanisms to address them. It's important to say that one of them is the resilience of natural systems. And essentially, we want to approach this with 4 components that are going from specific policies for innovation to the infrastructure, the circulation and infrastructure to enable circulation of talents in the different countries to address this challenge. We can go to the next one. And the policy framework we've been choosing is the Nature, Wealth and Power model, which was designed by USAID. We are at the second version, where a combination of factors which are essentially taking together nature, people and power systems, so the way you enable people to own the process, which is a critical component of resilience of natural systems, and the people that are living in it should be addressed. And we face projects that are going in completely different directions. We can go to the next one, which should be the last one. So just to mention one case we are spotting on in Cyprus, we have Akamas, which is a fantastic natural peninsula which has been completely preserved. in these years because it's a Natura 2000 site, and there are a number of buffers to avoid exploitation. And on the other side, you see the typical exploitation of touristic areas in Cyprus. So I think that we need an economy that is helping Akamas to remain and to stay where it is, to be a capital, a natural capital for our generation, but also for the future generation. So I hope that this discussion will help to go in this direction.
Thank you, Fabio, and not least for ending with the beautiful Akamas in northern Cyprus, a yet undeveloped area, but under pressure as so many others. Nature generates all these benefits that we all depend on, but what investment is available for it? How do we organize for that to happen? These are the essential questions. And now it's very good to have the private sector represented here by the way of Malik Bukepoulos from DEME, a major dredging company working on ocean management and going more and more into really green projects. Yes, most welcome. Look forward to hear from you.
Do you hear me? Yeah. Okay. So good afternoon. My name is Malik Bukebous. I worked 30 years in the marine engineering sector for the same company, so I love my company. And the last 7 years I was quite active in Egypt. So Egypt has allowed me to think a little bit more on what is required on nature-based solutions, since a lot of nature-based solutions are not in our backyard in Antwerp, but more in areas such as Egypt. So basically, we have 4 activity lines in our company: dredging and reclamation, which is mainly building or dredging in ports, channels, making terminals, beach nourishment. Then we have an activity line which is busy with offshore activities, initially oil and gas related, but the last 30 years we are, let's say, leading in the renewables, offshore renewables worldwide. We have one activity line which is specialized in environmental remediation, treating contaminated sediments and or confining them. And then a last activity line which is infra, specialized in big marine civil works like locks, ports, tunnels. These. So we are roughly 5,000 persons working everywhere in the world. And the last years we came to the, let's say, understanding that we have to do better than what we did before in terms of nature-based solutions. So I can say that our company is geared up to do that, because a lot in terms of research, not only scientifically but also financially, has happened. Our company is very focused now on sustainability and tries through different activities group the different SDGs and monitor that in a sustainability report. But we realized that focusing on projects with nature-based solutions, we can create substantially more impact. How do we do that? By not the traditional design methods, but rather by designing, executing and monitoring, what the proactive adaptive management system entails. This has to do with the fact that nature is not as simple as a building. Nature is a million years intelligent system that you have to understand and for which you have to be carefully managing it. Now, many of the nature positive impacts of nature-based solutions only materialize in the long term. So this requires what we call a holistic and integrated approach. And there I think our company can make the difference, or our industry can make the difference, because what we see is you need to group all these skills together. If you do an aquatic development project, you need to know something about morphology, hydraulics, water quality. You need to link that then to marine ecology, and even further to the SDGs, understanding how that impact fishermen, poverty, gender equality. So all these aspects are new for our industry, but are unavoidable if we want to understand the impact that we can generate on society. So the teaming up with governments and international organizations is quite important, and preferably that happens through public-private partnerships. And then, of course, you have to identify revenue streams. I would say for us, we, for the time being, subdivided in 3 types of revenue streams, being the first one, the direct ones, which are what we call ecosystem function can generate. So it could be fish, could be water, could be land, could be seaweed. And these are almost commodities that you can trade and make immediately bankable. That's the easy one. Then you have something in between, which are the carbon credits, where everybody in the last 10 years started to gradually understand what it is. We're still a long way to go, but we are getting there. And then you have, of course, the indirect impact. How do you value that? Everybody would like to pay for impact, but as said, it's not that easy to find the financing of impact, which can be migration, which can be poverty, which can be a lot of issues. Now, financing-wise, you have 2 big groups. You have the private, commercial banks and institutions. They come with typically equity and debt. You have the governments or the international organization. They come also with debt and small portions of grants. And by blending them together, we can de-risk. Of course, that can happen in different ways. The problem is that the business models today are always looking very short-term. Nature, unfortunately, is long-term. Aquatic development can go quite fast, and there you have certain components that can become bankable at short-term. But of course, unfortunately, you have to have horizons that go far beyond 20, 30 years. So the same happens with the politicians. There's democracies, but everywhere politicians, they have to deliver immediately, not after 30 years. So they want these impacts now. Then the evaluation and the valorization of these revenue streams, requires a lot of calculation, a lot of courage, I would say, because somebody has to put the numbers forward. And I can tell you, not every professor is that happy to put his name on the table. And then that I don't know what we have written here. The diversity of investors and the risk adversity of politics and the risk adversity of investors. So nobody likes to deal with risks. So how do we do that? Of course, we as a company, we can go very far in committing, in showing feasibility of what is to be done, but finally somebody has to share the risks, whether that are governments or international organizations. And then you have finally the nice procurement rules, because let's not forget that after World War II, everybody thought that competitive tendering is the only solution to have best value for money. I do doubt very much that. I think that we have been struggling a lot, and concepts such as transparency, monitoring, benchmarking should become much more the standard in the future. So this brings us to a project which I'm extremely proud of. I really want to share it because at the beginning of COP27, we were able to sign a cooperation agreement with the Suez Canal Authority. I would say is by far the most important endeavor that we take as a company, because in Egypt we have decided to focus on the Lake Bardawil development project together with a large-scale regreening in Sinai, where we club all the items that I have mentioned together. So it's the intention to cooperate with the government a term in a kind of public-private partnership where we have identified revenue streams, where we have put a lot of effort on holistic engineering. So here you see it. This is the Sinai. In the north of Sinai, there is a lake called Lake Bardawil, 80 kilometers by 20 kilometers, where we managed to put a whole plan, an action plan forward, calculating what the fish yields can be with time by intervening not only on the infrastructure, but also taking over the whole supply chain system, enforcing regenerative fish management, making sure that populations are paid their fair share of the thing. So as I said, holistic engineering. In this lake, you're talking about hydrodynamics, sediment transport, biochemistry, ecological impacts, and of course all the SDGs with respect to the local population. But even more important is that we started to understand that if we would reuse the sediments that are still fertile because they are degraded sediments over history, we try to recuperate them, treat them with all the technologies that we have in a sustainable and ecological way. And if we could use these sediments to upscale and accelerate regreening processes in deserts, which, let's be fair, everybody has already forgotten about deserts. Everybody focuses on degraded land, but would never dare to even consider regreening deserts. Well, this is a challenge that we want to take, for which we have signed this cooperation agreement, and where we believe we can have an impact on local weather. We can recirculate water, and that brings us to water. So there is a massive feedback of opportunities and impact that we can generate. And today we are indeed trying to understand this whole financial required engineering. Stop.
So thank you very much. That's a very thought-provoking observation about all the issues at stake here. What a company can do, but what is also very, very hard to deal with and hard to put a value on. So now we have the pleasure of introducing to you Mark Batum from South Africa. And Mark is a genuine entrepreneur. He's the founder of the network and the sort of organizational movement, Africa 2030. Most welcome.
Thanks, Thomas. And hello, everyone. How do you define positivity? Is it numerically, empirically based? Or is it relative, based on incremental achievements toward the completion of a common goal? Our common goal is to reverse the whirlwind of degradation that we've created, to restore our biodiversity, and to keep this planet from spontaneously combusting. Just take care of it. With that in mind, I believe that positivity must be the latter. It is relative, as in incremental achievements that get us closer or make a positive contribution to the world's dilemma. And these achievements will not always coincide with a numerical plus sign, product, sum, or difference that is empirically positive. As humans, you see, we are very quick to perceive positivity as the pursuit of empirical increase, regeneration, restoration, refurbishment, and often pair this understanding with the notion that to offset or reduce whatever is negative must also inherently be positive. But is it true? When it comes to nature, it's slightly more complex. There are layers, differences in regional needs and definitions for our environment's demand at different times, both at the local, then at the global level. Whose biodiversity do we then talk about when we enforce the moniker of positivity? Why? We would be wise to treat our planet like the homeostasis-seeking being that she is. Balance. It is the key ingredient for effective nature positivity. To elaborate, I'll tell you a story. We're all children in church in Mali. And the kids have just been dismissed to an outhouse that we call Sunday school, when upon us comes the largest swarm of red locusts. Imagine the entire sky shadowed by flying crickets or grasshoppers, except this time they're fiery red. They come in all shapes and sizes, and they're literally landing all over you. The flowers, the trees, anything green or living. It's apocalyptic, but an inevitable part of nature, says texts as ancient as the Bible. What I witnessed when I was 7 years old was a seasonal migration. And just to put into perspective, the largest swarm ever reported spanned 200 square kilometers with a population of 10 billion locusts. It was plague status. The response in this case by the FAO is extermination, using a species-specific biopesticide. In 2020, regional efforts required over $200 million to finance this. Aircraft, spraying vehicles, and a suite of state-of-the-art surveillance technology to control the outbreak. Back in 2005, efforts cost the community more than double that. And more crops are indeed being saved today than ever before. So there is significant but limited progress. What I propose is to innovate further and invest in ways that would nullify the need to manage locust outbreaks in the first place, to incubate solutions, adaptations at the local level, replicate the process, and let the job be done with greater local buy-in than ever before. But this isn't just about locusts. In Africa, there's an annual $500 billion infrastructure gap that affects agriculture productivity challenges in particular. And they're primarily to do with irrigation. However, of the $620 billion invested into startups around the world in 2017, only 0.7% of investment happened into Africa. You'll excuse me, but we have to look into this untapped realm of youth-led innovation because I know we have the capability to resolve these issues. In front of you here is a layman's version of the Vision 2030 Fund's operation. We are developing an index to help us identify what we call innovation-dependent spheres of our food and water value chains. It corresponds to a VR map, which has infinite applications to be developed within it. We trace the inputs, the processes, the outputs of the value chain and reference their efficiencies to any agricultural product, a crop. The result is a pinpoint rating system that tells us exactly where in the value chain innovation is needed to make a positive outcome for people who depend on the crop. It is an in-house tool being used to guide our investment strategy, but I'm happy to announce today that this tool will go public before the end of COP28 in the UAE, and I hope to be there to unveil it to all of you. So let me conclude by saying this. If you are poisoned, your liver and your kidneys filter and flush you out. And if the load is too heavy to bear, one by one, your organs begin to shut down until the inevitable happens. Ladies and gentlemen, the living organism we call Earth has spiraled into the last phases of life. Organ failure, the downward spiral toward the inevitable. Her lungs are collapsing, her liver is deteriorating, her kidneys are overwhelmed. Resolving these issues is a path that bolsters food and water security for all. It creates livelihoods, it restores biodiversity, and even addresses poverty. My greatest honor is to turn this reality into practical, truly nature-positive interventions. And I encourage you all to set truly nature-positive goals. If we do so using local, inclusive, indigenous leadership in our solution-making institute, then centuries, maybe millennia of future generations will survive because we did it. We nipped infertility in the bud. We rendered rising temperatures powerless. We created space for nature to decide her own optimal mix of biodiversity. We listened, and we did it while remaining positive. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you for further deepening the perspective on the value of nature and at the same time, the costs of mismanagement that we are, that's ongoing. Now, as you also illustrated, some things can be valued and others are not valued, and that's part of this whole underinvestment tragedy that we're confronted with. Now we have with us Wengen Chen from Norway. Can you hear us here? Yeah.
Yes, hello, Thomas.
Very good. So now we're coming another step here on the accounting side, what we can value and what we can't, and how that's playing out. So great to have you with us. Wengen Chen is an expert on the socioeconomic impact assessment, and she's a leading part of that work in the task force. So most welcome.
Thank you, Thomas. Good afternoon, everyone. I will talk about economic valuation for nature-based solutions and ecosystem accounting. Nature-based solutions support the delivery of ecosystem services and goods and bring benefits to our society. Some ecosystem services, such as food provision and reduced water treatment costs, can be easily monetized and incorporated in the business revenue. Other ecosystem services, like improved habitat quality, may not be presented directly in the revenue, but may still affect the profit through corporate reputation, consumer loyalty, and preferences. It is important for us to remember that all ecosystem service benefits enhance social welfare. Next slide, please. Economic benefits of nature-based solutions have increasingly caught attention under the Horizon 2020 Network Nature Project Task Force 3. There are more than 21 nature-based solution projects evaluating their economic benefits with case studies across Europe, involving many categories of nature-based solutions. Next slide, please. How can we best support the investments in nature? Do we have good enough tools? Traditional cost-benefit analysis needs to incorporate ecosystem and ecosystem services. The United Nations launched SIA, Ecosystem Accounting Framework, connecting ecosystems with ecosystem services and natural capital. SIA framework provides an integrated way to evaluate nature-based solutions benefits. In the Oslo, Norway, we are piloting the ecosystem accounting framework to study how eutrophication reduction and blue forest restoration could improve ecological status and habitat condition so as to increase fish biomass resilience and ecosystem service supply resilience. The framework also allows us to find out who benefits from what service and by how much. These are important questions for investment decisions. Lower in the page, the Bayesian table shows that the ecosystem service values for restoring the field are huge and have many various dimensions and beneficiaries. Next slide, please. How ecosystem accounting could support investment decisions depends on who invests, the purpose of investment, and its spatial scale. The local real estate developer who invests in blue-green space to reduce heat impacts and increase leisure opportunities will need high resolution and low error data, both physical and monetary, while regional government mapping the potentials of nature-based solution industries will only need to identify the contribution of ecosystem services in the regional contexts and needs relatively low resolution and more qualitative data. As we all know, nature-based solutions bring positive ecosystem service benefits and have good potential for developing new business. I would like to take this opportunity to convey a message to all the investors who care about nature. Why not generate some pilot cases to see whether the business model in your mind works? We, as researchers, are more than happy to support you to share our experience, to co-design your business model together with you. to support you with data and methods to evaluate the ecosystem services benefits. Thank you very much.
So thank you for that message from the task force. So more piloting, and there is a welcoming to more collaboration in that context. So now we have another effort that's ongoing, really experimentation and development work to match the need of investment channel to the real projects with trees, plantations, and so on. Chloe Tweger from AI Trees, yeah? So welcome.
Hi, can everyone hear me okay? And thank you for Wenting and ending on that note, because I'll be talking about our pilot to exactly do that, build the business case for nature-based solutions in cities. So I'm here from Trees AI, and we're a platform to establish nature as an investable part of our urban infrastructure. It's a partnership between Dark Matter Labs, my organization, and Lucid Minds, and we've been supported in the past by UKRI, Morgan Stanley, Google.org, EIT Climate Kick, World Economic Forum, and most recently, Esme Fairbairn Foundation. And I really like the framing of today. When I hear the words nature positive, what I think of is complexity, diversity, interdependence. And listening to what everyone said about needing collective action, I think we're all on the same page on that. So my point will be, how can we build an economy which appreciates, complexity and diversity? And we're already seeing this growing demand for nature-based solutions. So the sort of interest in nature-based solutions has led to a quadrupling of the voluntary carbon market in a year. But as the diagram on your right shows,
how long can we?
Carbon
We have to stop
sequestration
short, or
is just
have a few
one of the many bankable benefits of an urban tree. And Malik, I'll come to your point, because I believe nature-based solutions are also found in backyards in Antwerp. An urban tree generates reduced costs in terms of water treatment for your utility, reduced insurance payments for flooding. Wenting, you mentioned energy reduction costs also, all the way to unbankable things like crime decrease and lower obesity. So we're sort of looking at what the TCFD did for SBTI. What will that TNFD do? How can we go about creating a market for nature, not to sell natural assets, but to value the ecosystem services that's created? Because there is this 890 billion annual gap in financing nature. But for us, the root of this is actually a delivery gap. And so this speaks to what Monica was saying around bankable projects. And I feel like cities haven't really, played much of a role yet in the session. I just wanted to take a pause and say, who here lives in cities? Okay, and so anybody who experienced the heat wave this summer from Europe knows instinctively the benefit that a tree-lined street can play. Cities is where 70% of our global emissions come from, 10% of which comes from air conditioning and cooling. So the thermal comfort provided by nature, it's got huge mitigation powers. It's a different sort of scale. It's a sort of micro, massive scale. How can we get these projects in aggregation? There are challenges. So there are manifold challenges with delivering urban nature-based solutions. So first of all, in terms of desirability, we've heard Malik get a brilliant description of how complex nature is. We don't have the information to understand the benefits, the possible financial returns, the long-term values of nature. Nature is highly complex. Unlike carbon, it's not fungible. Each area, a tree, a cedar ash will grow differently depending on where it's planted. So we need dynamic models which can help us understand the benefit that nature provides. Even if we can argue for desirability, there are problems of feasibility, especially in an urban context. There's a lack of space, land's at a super high premium, projects are very small, too small to be investable. There's a small market, and there's an unfamiliarity with the capex, and time and again we hear from people the OPEX. So often trees are planted and they're not maintained, and you don't get any of their benefits. And then finally, even if we can figure out a feasible delivery model, the viability. As I've said, and as everyone said, nature is multi-beneficial and the beneficiaries are multiple. So we need to find ways to collectively invest in this. Yet we have siloed departments, we have issues with procurement, bureaucratic processes, and a lack of standards, although I know that wonderful work is being done to provide the assurance the market needs. So in response to this, the Trees AI platform, it's a cloud-based open source platform to connect NBS to impact finance, is trying to alleviate these three issues. So first of all, we've developed agent-based models, which are dynamic for ecosystem services that can be highly calibrated to the location. We're in the process of developing portfolio building tools so we can aggregate projects. You can do sort of risk reporting, etc. And then we are developing outcomes-based financing mechanisms in order to provide the sort of structures needed for collective investment. So the platform, these are videos.
1 minute now.
1 minute, okay. So very, very quickly, build, invest. These are the different sort of platform features. And I just want to quickly talk about our pilot, because Wenting, you mentioned this, and this is very critical to the way that the Trees AI operates, is we believe to test the platform, we have to run through pilot. So at COP26, we secured our first pilot in Glasgow, and we will be onboarding a few more cities next year. Just very quickly on the Glasgow pilot, so it's focused on stormwater retention, so natural flood management, with a range of other co-benefits. And what we're doing is improving our modelling and monitoring skills through this pilot. We're looking at a collaborative model for delivering the projects and also developing the outcomes-based financing mechanisms. So I can talk more about the IVIVIA methodology we use, how we built the portfolio, but to focus a little bit for the maybe 10 seconds I have left on the instruments that we're developing. How do we build this business case that Wenting was talking about? So we're working with mortgage providers to understand, there's 1.2 million more properties that are going to be flooded in the UK. So they have huge risks to do with property values and probability of default, and transition risks to do with regulation. So we're building commercial agreements which are buyer-led but involve project developers also, in order to finance the delivery of nature-based solutions, which then, as the outcomes are reported, can then be satisfied in the contracts. And as I've said, there are multiple beneficiaries, so it's important that we create these sort of vehicles where multiple actors can invest together. So in Glasgow, we have Flood Re, Clyde Climate Forest, the Metropolitan Glasgow Strategic Drainage Partnership, Scottish Water, and Nationwide, and the City Council, of course, all around the table, where we've set up this collaborative governance where we're going about creating this together. And I guess slightly rushed at the end, but you can find out more at treesinfrastructure.com. As I mentioned, we're looking for more pilots, but similarly, any sort of partners who are developing similar things. And you can always get in touch at treesai@darksmatterlabs.org. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Cleo. And thanks for keeping the time. And yes, illustrating a way of trying to get all those revenue streams to come together. So we don't have much time left, unfortunately. I wanted to open the floor for brief comments, questions from the audience. Please. Mike here.
Thank you for very interesting presentation about Trees AI. My question is it globally adaptable, or that means only for Europe and the UK?
So now I will pick a few more questions here, if there are any more. Here, over here.
Thank you. So when it comes to valuing nature, for example, the tree, I was wondering, do you value the tree differently in different regions of the world to see how much value they bring? And then when we have limited resources, where do we decide, do we give it to the trees that bring the most value, or do we try to spread it in different areas so that each area gets some benefit?
Okay, another question about trees there. Yes? Any more? Here.
Thank you for the talk today. What public policy measures do you think are the most important to prioritize in the next 2 to 3 years to drive this agenda for more investment into nature-based solutions?
Okay, so thank you. We have to leave it at this. Final comments now. You start. A couple of questions for you, Cleo.
Thank you for that question. So the platform has been built in a way that it can be easily contextualized to any context. What's really important is that we work with the city to ensure that we have the right data set because of the scoring methodology of the projects, which actually speaks to the second question here, relies on having an understanding of what the risks of the city are and therefore what the best nature-based solution would be. Also, it's important, this is a partnership approach, so it's important that if we have the right partners, it could work anywhere in the world. would require contextualization, though. And to the question about how we go about valuing a tree, which is a brilliant question, and I also invite my panel to add to it. In the context of Glasgow, the approach we're taking is to work with partners in this buyer-led way to understand how, according to their own risks, they're willing to pay for the trees. So we're sort of taking a mixture of a cost-based model and then a very bespoke valuation. There are, I know, the best tool, iTree also.
Theo, thank you.
Sorry.
Now time is running out.
I can speak to you after that. Sorry.
Yes, continue after. To Mark. Mark, you have a single word. What's most important next?
Policy, I believe, is most important, especially when it comes to matters that are localized. Nature-based solutions, positivity, all require contextualization. Dr. Thomas said it at the start as well. And I have a theory of change that says redefining what public-private partnerships mean in that context, specifically to prioritize localities and their stakeholders, remapping the entire approach to development is crucial, no matter where you go, but where I come from especially.
Thank you, Mark. Malik?
But for policy, I would just say a little bit more effort in the coordination with the private sector. I think that can be substantially better.
I think it's rethinking collective action, public-private roles, more clarity, and also investment planning. I mean, so much we spend through public procurement. If we do it better, we can achieve more. For that, it would be great if you come the 12th of November to the Climate Mobility Pavilion, 1 p.m. We are having an action towards UN conference on water next year on that.
Thank you very much. And there is not much time to sum up, but let me just say, we need the piloting. Government and policy is important, but we can't wait. We have to work in collaboration and get going. With these projects that were presented here, there is a lot of action, but there are challenges and there is a need of learning and collaboration. So let's proceed with that, and then also governments and others will come along and we'll get the job done. It's very hard, but we have to. Thank you very much.